Alright guys, so I have a really good question that was posed to me from my good friend Anthony Maglino, and anyone who knows Anthony personally, he knows that he loves questions, and that's a very good thing, especially in the field of exercise science, because it's such a hands-on, practical form of education. So, what he actually asked me it was a very loaded question. First off, why do I advocate low volume training versus high volume training, and how that really goes into how I program clients? And then he also expanded on that by asking within a program what my thoughts are on feeder days or feeder sets at the end of particular workouts, and I'll go into complete detail on what he means exactly by that and whether or not I find them to be valuable in a program. So first off, I'll start with, why do I generally advocate low volume training over higher volume training? And for me, most of this comes from anecdotal results. So anecdotal results are what you can see. So results from what I've tested on myself, results that I've tested on my clients. So what I really find to be successful with trainers in the fitness industry is a mix of reading and understanding scientific literature, but also at the end of the day, seeing what produces the most results with your clients, because that's the goal for a trainer, and that's a goal for the client as well. It all comes down to results. They're paying you to try to lead them to a desired result, and me as a bodybuilder, I want the results. So there's usually a real gray area when it comes to evidence that's proven in a study versus evidence proven actually in the gym, because it really comes down to what people are selected for a study, and very rarely will you see studies where you may have them labeled as trained athletes, but very often it's not going to be the level of athlete that trainers like me tend to work with. So people that are really looking to influence their physique, whether they're competitors or not, I generally look toward the people, and I work with a lot of the people. Anthony, who asked me this question, is certainly one of them, who really takes life by the horns and just goes after it and is able to produce the maximum amount of results for himself. So that's a little bit of a side tangent. But back to the question, why I advocate low volume training. For me, I have seen overtraining happen very less with a lower volume approach as opposed to a higher volume approach. And what I mean by overtraining is when you program for a given period of time, and you can, let me preface this by saying, you can overtrain by using too much volume, which would be too many sets, too many reps per workout. And you can also overtrain with intensity. And with intensity is your heavier loads that are pushed farther and farther to and past muscle failure within your training sessions. So with those both actually existing in the training world, I find it less and less often that people will actually overtrain by intensity. Where people run into problems is when they combine both of them. And it's a very basic fundamental idea that you must understand that volume and intensity are inversely proportional. So as your intensity goes up, your volume must go down. You can't run a high volume, high intensity program. I've tried it. Anyone who wants immediate results, everyone's been there, and they've experimented with it, and it will always give you the same result. It may work for a week, it may work for 2 if you're lucky, but after that your body's going to be beat up, your nervous system's not going to be able to recover, and you're going to have inflammation everywhere. So first off, you can't combine the two. And a lot of those previous points that I just mentioned with overtraining, so CNS fatigue, inflammation, those are 2 big factors that tend to show up a little bit more with a higher volume approach. On the other hand, a lower volume approach allows what I really teach my clients, what I ingrain as the most important variables. It's the lower volume approach allows me to do that in a much more efficient manner. So the bare necessities of what are essential in a training program usually come down to execution and effort. So how well can you actually contract a given working muscle against load? And then once you are able to master that execution for each muscle group, how far can you push those sets? How much work can you get done with that given muscle group without your execution breaking down? So with that, it takes a lot of focus within your nervous system and within your muscular system to be able to, that's where the mind-muscle connection comes from. Be able to connect your mind or your nervous system with your muscle to be able to contract the correct muscles hard and throughout a set for a given time and not have your form break down. With that, it's much, much easier to be able to practice that and reinforce those habits with less volume. I always say start with a rep. Own every rep of every set. If you're able to own every rep, then you own every set, you'll begin to own every exercise and eventually own every workout. So that allows you to have constant progression. And with the lower volume approach, you're going to be able to do that better. And a lot of it comes down to, once you have those mastered, that's when those other factors that I talked about, the central nervous system fatigue, those signs of overtraining, inflammation, they tend to coincide a little bit more with higher volume. Not that I'm saying that higher volume does not have its place, but people who generally will ask questions about higher volume stuff or really have trained for a little bit and then switch to a higher volume approach, 90% of the time won't have those fundamental aspects of execution and effort nailed down. And for me as a trainer, if I can take that person through a workout and show them what I mean by a set, how far I actually push their sets, how precise I look for their execution to be, then they'll realize that they will never be able to continue that high volume approach. It just won't be sustainable. And if they tried, here they come again, those signs of overtraining, it won't be able to happen very long. And I always say, you're never able to out-train your recovery. So with that, that's pretty much why I tend to favor a lower volume approach. I could get into that a little bit more, but I wanted to keep it brief to the main points of why. So first off, it allows me to teach the vital factors of what will influence the most change in your body: precise exercise execution, smart exercise selection, and then effort from there to push your sets with those other two factors, execution and exercise selection, nailed down. And also what I've seen for myself and others that I've worked with, that a lower volume approach is less likely to lead to overtraining, less likely to bring up some of the factors that coincide with overtraining, such as inflammation in your joints, central nervous system fatigue, among those, and also a few others. Second question Anthony posed to me was about feeder workouts, or feeder days in between a workout of a given muscle group. So what a feeder day really is, so I'll use the example with arms, because feeder workouts are commonly used with arms, but they can really be used with any weak point that you may want to bring up within your training split. So say I hit an arm workout on Monday, and then I have another arm workout program, let's say Friday. In between there, none of these are actually exact dates. Say on a Wednesday, I wanted to perform a feeder workout for arms. That would consist, it'll fall at the end of the workout, whatever that workout may be. Let's say it was a back workout on Wednesday. The arm workout will consist of high rep work, generally done with bands, cables, light dumbbells, with the proposed benefits of increased blood flow to help with the recovery in between your traditional, more loaded workouts. in that case, between that Monday and Friday. So I personally have never used feeder workouts. I never use them with arms or any other weak point for that matter. But I really think this could actually coincide with the previous question. You can accumulate a little bit of excess volume from a feeder workout. That may be a little bit of a controversial statement. Someone will definitely say, Austin, I may be doing 2 sets of 50 reps. How is that going to inhibit my overall recovery efforts? It may not, depending on the person, but just realize that it is an additional stimulus that you will have to account for. But in that case, especially with weak points, wherever it may be, whether it's arms, shoulders, chest, what I usually do is, instead of having a longer gap in between my workouts to begin with, and then maybe with a feeder in between, the way I program my weak points simply is that's how I will build my training split. I will build my training split around my weak points. So knowing my recovery efforts for a given split, what I will do is program a workout for a given muscle group as soon as I'm recovered from the previous workout. So if I have, in my case, I'll use me as an example, my shoulders are a weak point. So I'll start my split with shoulders, and then whether it be 2, 3, depending on how well my recovery is. So you're definitely going to have to assess that when programming this. Are you sleeping 8 hours a night? What are your calories like? How's your digestion? Are you able to absorb what you're eating? Your hydration levels, your stress levels? Pretty much all those other lifestyle factors outside of the gym that can affect your recovery. So take a look at those, and that can influence how long in between the workouts you're going to need to take. Doesn't really matter too much, but just realize it will exist. So if your recovery is down, don't attempt to try to hit a muscle group every 2 days. But if your recovery is there, it may be possible, especially like I said with my example being shoulders, a smaller muscle group. You could probably get away with it more so than if I were trying to hit legs every 2 days that are much larger muscle groups. So that's what I'll do. I'll program delts, and then I'll program everything around that. So I'll have, if I'm trying to hit shoulders every 3 days, I'll have a shoulder day. Maybe I'll throw with another muscle group. You guys have probably seen this on my splits in the article section on the site. I'll have the shoulders, and then I'll plug in something else. And then once I know my shoulders are recovered, let's say it's 3 days, here comes another shoulder workout. So nothing really in between. I feel that if your volume's low, if your exercise execution is on point, what you can do is simply just program from there and just hit it as often as possible and hit it with a quality stimulus. That's another thing when it comes to feeder workouts. You're not really going to get a quality stimulus to grow and grow a lot of tissue from it. So that's why I stick to your traditional workouts, or my traditional workouts that I will program using my reverse pyramid sets, working up to my top sets, maybe 2 or 3 working sets per exercise. Keep it simple, so the volume will be low, but in turn, another thing, as I mentioned, volume and intensity being inversely proportional, volume and frequency are also inversely proportional. So if I'm trying to hit that muscle group more frequently, generally my volume is going to have to be lower. So that also coincides with my lower volume approach. So this is how the ideas will really come together when it comes to programming. So feeder workouts, do they have a place? Yes, they may. Do I use them? No. Do I think they're going to be the answer to any weak point? No. Weak points are generally going to occur because your exercise execution isn't as sharp as opposed to your strong muscle groups. So with stronger muscle groups, you're naturally going to be able to put your body in a position to contract those muscles a lot better than you would your weak points. So that's what I always look for first when someone comes to me saying, I have a weak point. I'll always look at their execution first, and then I'll look at their effort within their sets. That'll happen a lot with the bigger muscle groups. If people have weak legs, weak back, that may be a sign of, because no one wants to get very deep into those sets with those larger muscle groups because it's very fatiguing, and they don't want to take themselves to that point. So that's usually a red flag there. And then also with your programming, if your volume's through the roof and you can't recover from it, another sign, volume could be too low. If you're hitting, maybe this one's a lot less common. And also with the volume thing, can also go hand in hand with execution. I see a lot of people when they have a weak point throw the kitchen sink at their whatever weak muscle that may be, and try to master, even that's a generous term there, 20 different exercises. Definitely look at your exercise selection. Build your weak point workouts around a few really solid exercises based on the principles of bracing, alignment, and profile, and then just look to increase your load without having your execution falter from there. So I think that's probably the best way to address a weak point. Probably going to be more efficient in the long run with your overall split than feeder days, but if you want to throw them in, just realize that they will add a little bit of a stimulus, and from there, that's pretty much it. But like I said, I generally tend to favor just training the muscle again once it's recovered, and try to program it as often as possible if you're going to address a weak point. And I pretty much answered that question under the presumption that if you're performing a feeder workout, it's probably going to be for a weak point, because generally you're not going to look for any kind of additional stimulus for a strong body part. So Anthony, first off, I hope that answered your question, and also I hope this provided a nice little insight into how I tend to program people, how I will address weak points. So answering specific questions, but also trying to give as much of a broad overview that you guys can take and add to your thought process of how I like to program people and what I've seen that actually produces the best results, so you can apply to your training as well. So Anthony, I hope that answered your question, and I hope the rest of you guys enjoyed this video.